Welcome to an Imagination TV Alliance special. My name is Georgia Elliott, and along with Steph, I'll be your host today. We are joined today by an amazing group of guests here, so I hope you guys have had a really good day so far, and I hope you enjoy what's to come. As I said before, my name is Georgia Elliott. I'm currently living on Gumbaynggirr land, which is sunny Coffs Harbour, which isn't so sunny at the moment, unfortunately, but I'm sure that will change. I'm currently the president for the AIM program in that region, and I'm really excited to be hosting this with Steph today.
Thanks, Georgia. My name's Stephanie. I'm the Assistant Creative Director at AIM, been here for about 5 years. I'm a Wongatha Nudju woman currently on Bindal and Walgarookaba land up in far North Queensland in Townsville. And Georgia kind of skipped over a little bit of her story, so we'll get to dive into that a little bit later as we uncover the experience that she's had with the program. I think it's like 9 years that she's been around, so a lot longer than me. And I'm really excited to have a chat with our guests today and dive into their worlds and look at what the university might look like within their networks for 2022. So to give us an intro to the show, in 2019 at the Garma Festival, young people stood on Yolngu land and made a call to action for the Prime Minister and the Education Ministers of Australia to listen to their voices. Delivering the Imagination Declaration, they asked them to imagine what was possible if they were given the freedom to write a new story, to imagine what was possible if we use imagination to create solutions to some of the world's biggest problems. Changing the narrative is what we're going to talk about today. At Imagination University, this is known as flipping the script. And school students can join the university as filmmakers, artists, writers, CEOs for good, and ambassadors, all taking on and designing projects of change that help to flip the script and alleviate educational inequity. And we'll also have a chat about what this university is going to look like in the future. So over to Georgia to introduce our guests.
So our amazing group of guests that we have today, we have James Forbes, who's a part of the James Goodall Institute here in Australia. I'm a very big fan, so I'm kind of like fangirling at the moment. I love Jane Goodall. And we also have Asma Halal, who is a part of Creating Chances, which I've heard is just absolutely amazing. So I'm really happy that you're both here today. Thank you so much for coming with us today on this journey.
Would you like to give us an intro to yourself, James, and tell us a little bit about what it is that you do with Jane Goodall Institute?
Yeah, thanks, Steph. I'd love to, and thanks for the introduction, Georgia. So as Georgia said, I'm James from the Jane Goodall Institute. We're one of 26 Jane Goodall Institute offices around the world. But here in Australia, we're focused on Jane's youth program, Roots and Shoots, which has been running since '91 in Tanzania and is now in 60 countries. So that's providing young people with the opportunity to get involved with environmental projects that support climate action, solving the biodiversity crisis in their communities. And in terms of flipping the script, Jane likes to talk about, thinking local or acting local before you think global, rather than thinking global and acting local, because when we think global, we can get a little bit overwhelmed. And when you focus on your local community and what needs to happen in your local community, and you can see a solution, what we do through Roots and Shoots is give young people the tools and inspiration to actually make things happen. And they've got the great ideas. We don't tell them what to do. They come up with the concepts. We give them a structure through which they do that, but it's really up to them. And so it's all about agency and driving themselves forward and them finding the solutions to some of the bigger problems that we're facing on the planet right now.
Yeah, sounds like we're very much aligned in our vision for young people, James. We'll dive into a little bit more of that later. Asma, would you like to take yourself off mute and introduce yourself to the audience? Tell us a little bit about the work that you're involved in.
Sure, absolutely. So I'm from Sydney, Newington, and I just want to first acknowledge that I'm on the lands of the Wangal people and pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and those tuning in today as well. I'm absolutely humbled to be here. Personally, I know firsthand the intergenerational conflict that comes with navigating multiple identities, and I'm so fortunate to be able to serve my community by combining my passion for sport and education to enhance the lives of young people. And I'm equally blessed to be able to do that through a not-for-profit organization called Creating Chances, which was, established in 2015 by two co-founding organizations, one called Football United and the other one called Rugby Youth Foundation. Both organizations really passionate about empowering young people through the power of sport. Our passion isn't so much about generating Australia's next best athletes, but very much around how we can use sport as a tool to achieve outcomes in health, education, and employment, so that young people can contribute to living healthier lives, but also helping them shape inclusive and cohesive societies. So we predominantly work in primary schools and high schools across New South Wales, and have worked with thousands of young people, where some of them are currently working with us today, which we're excited about, but also helping them on their journey post high school. So in a nutshell, that's me and that's us.
Yeah, it sounds really great, and I'd love to dive into some of those transferable skills that you can get from sport leadership, and maybe you can fill me in on some of the other amazing things. I did a little bit of sport throughout my life, but never on the level that you're actually doing it to bring more diversity and inclusion into communities, which is something that I feel like we all are driving for with some of the problems that we're looking at in the world. Georgia, do you want to swing over to the very first question that we've got lined up?
Yep, no problem. So we just have a few questions for the guests today. The first one, which I believe has been brought up in the chat, James, what are some of the ideas that the young people you work with have come up to create change locally?
So that's a great question. I'd say the largest idea that young people have come up with locally is a new program we're about to launch called Embrace the Wild. And this was conceived a couple of years ago by a global cohort of young people in Roots and Shoots, and with Jane Goodall in attendance as well. And the idea of it is about creating, and this was totally their concept, about creating a resource kit, which we've done, which runs to over 100 pages, of projects you can do in your backyard, on your balcony, in your school, in your community, to create habitat and microhabitat for wildlife. And then from there, they once they've completed that project, we're building partnerships with training entities like TAFE, Taronga Zoo, and of course, IMAGI-NATION University, to get these young people then passing through from there with their great concepts and their great projects to get formal training. And from there, we're building an internship framework with the Australian Land Conservation Alliance, which represents some of the biggest conservation organisations in Australia, like Bush Heritage, the Australian Wildlife Conservancy, the Land Trusts, Greening Australia. And this is going to provide jobs for the future for young people that are wondering, where's my career going to go? What opportunities are there for me? So if you want to work outside, you want to be out there in nature, helping yourself and helping the environment that we all rely on, this is what we're trying to do at JGI, is absolutely, from end to end, from primary school to school leaver, create a pathway for these young people to then get access to jobs of the future. And this is really important to us. So this was a concept that was brought up by young people, and I saw it and said, this is awesome. This is exactly the sort of thing we need to be doing.
Yeah, it sounds like they're not just thinking about what jobs they are going to have in the future, that they're actually creating those jobs of the future as well. How important do you think it is, James, to give the kids the freedom and remove the ceilings of what we think they're capable of when designing some of these solutions and projects?
Look, as I said in my opening, this is something that's very close to Jane's heart personally. She believes that, the Roots and Shoots program that she established in Tanzania was all about saying, you guys come up with the solution yourselves. It's not for the adults to tell you what to do. It's for you guys to come up with the solution. Absolutely, we're there to support and help remove barriers and so forth. But they have fantastic ideas. So it's about, their mentors, the role that adults can play in terms of mentoring these ideas, taking, as we all know, a blue sky idea has to be kind of converted into something that can be executed. So how do we support them to do that without corrupting the idea or kind of taking it over? That's what we're trying to be, as kind of facilitators, holding the space for them to convert that idea into something where the rubber's going to hit the road, and that's going to convert into outcomes and action, because that's obviously where change happens.
Yeah, so important, not just the awareness, it's the actual actions that take place. And I know how that feels when you actually accomplish something as well, like goal setting and achieving. Seems like such a little thing, but when you actually do that, it stays with you forever. It keeps pushing you towards your next goal, I guess. Ashmal, seeing as we're talking a lot about, we're talking focused on school students today, what do you think, what do you see with your community and your networks? What are some of the problems that are facing school students today in terms of education?
It's a great question. And I think with regards to challenges faced by young people in education, there are many, but one in particular that we're working on is about providing equal or equitable access to leadership opportunities and access to the support and role models to help them get there. We find that a lot of opportunities are provided to people who are in environments where it's relatively easy to access, or it's just part of the system that they're in, or, they're expensive, or, there are sort of logistical barriers around accessing those opportunities. So that's one aspect. Another aspect is around identifying or understanding future pathways. So I guess for all young people and many adults as well today, it's hard to know what it is you're going to do in the future. And I think having opportunities where people can have access to a whole range, or exposure to a whole range of experiences, is crucial to enabling young people to really find out what their potential is or what their interests are. And I find that maybe there's a disconnect between how education is set up and how it's actually going to help them prepare for the future. So yeah, if we're talking mostly the challenges that we see, it's the lack of access to opportunities in terms of logistics and exposure, but also the experiences to help them identify what their goals are.
Yeah, it sounds like we're very much on the same thought path. We've got a philosophical knowledge area that we are diving into called hoodie economics, where we're just researching what the exchange of time, knowledge and opportunities look like. And we kick the dollar a little bit further down the line. And also just with, I think you said something about knowledge as well, access to knowledge, like what mentors and what role they can play in that, because education takes place in every aspect of your life, and it's not just within the school gate. So having, I guess, different perspectives, so you don't just have a singular focus on one thing. And just a comment for both of you, I think, like when you're giving young people the space to design jobs of the future, or thinking about what these things even might be. There's a NASA study, I think it's NASA, don't quote me on that. They did an imagination index study on adults and young people, and like 5-year-olds have like an 80% index of imagination, and it's kind of lowers the older that you get. So it only makes sense, right, that if we're looking for new ideas, that we involve them in what some of these decisions should be.
Absolutely, I agree. I think as well, the way education or the school system is structured, it really depends on the leadership of that school and how open they are to creativity and inspiring creativity in young people, and inviting, external service providers or various community members to help with that process. After school or in school. I know in some of the schools we work with, they're very open to new ideas, where they really like block out times in the curriculum for us to come in, and for programs like ours to really help facilitate conversations and support the teachers, I think is key, where teachers are so bound by curriculum and achieving the outcomes. It often the system makes it difficult for them to introduce that creativity, although, so much respect to what they do. But I think the school environment should be encouraged to collaborate and work with, stakeholders to help with that creative journey.
Yeah, definitely. Given the space, I feel like often teachers and students feel like they're on opposite sides when they're both part of the same system and both trying to achieve something within that. We have another question from Georgia for both of you, so we can dive a little more into thinking around flipping the script.
Yep. So, open question, anyone can answer. What is your take on flipping the script or changing the narrative, and why is it something we need to be focused on?
I'm happy to dive in if you'd like. Look, I think the flipping the script for us is coming at things from a structural point of view. I talked about the Embrace the Wild program just before, which is part of, this concept. But, in Africa, the Jane Goodall Institute has a program called Takare, which is about community-centered conservation. So it's very much about focusing on communities and working with communities to solve biodiversity challenges, particularly, obviously, Jane's famous for her work with chimpanzees, and that forms a huge part of that work there. But we're looking to do that here as well. It's not just a challenge in Africa; it's a challenge right around the world, where conservation efforts need to be a whole of community response. And yet, obviously, in some disadvantaged communities, wherever they may be, environmental action and sustainability may be something of an abstraction. And, when you've got more pressing and immediate challenges in your life that may involve, a roof over your head, food on the table, kids to school, how do you prioritize something that's existential for us? It suddenly becomes, it's not a priority. Certainly, it may be understood as being something important, but I've got something I have to deal with right in front of me that I just have to attend to. So what we want to do at JGI is really create a pathway for people to not only lift them out of disadvantage, but contribute significantly to this big existential crisis we've got around climate and biodiversity, and be part of that solution. So what we want to do is take it away from being an abstraction and actually help solve their immediate challenges by giving them economic opportunities, jobs that are going to make a difference, they're going to feel passionate about, they're going to be feeling like they're making a huge impact across the community for themselves personally as well. Rather than it's an afterthought and I go out and I find a career and then somehow and get work, and somehow from there I've got to think about how we're solving the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis, because it's not immediate for me. Yet it needs to be immediate for all of us, because there's not going to be a planet without it. So how do we bring all of the community along? We want to make sure that what we're doing is supporting those people in the community that have got less advantage, And as you would know, a lot of the most, when we think about sustainability, a lot of the most expensive products are the most sustainable. So if you're making a choice in the supermarket about whether you buy, the product that's better for the planet or the one that's cheaper, you're probably going to opt for option B, right? And so we want to change that. We want to make it possible for those decisions to be accessible for everyone, not just some people. So that's part of how we see, our role in flipping the script.
Yeah, that's a really cool reason and stuff like that. Really resonates with me because, like you said, a lot of people will rather go for whatever's cheaper in their pockets rather than what's environmentally sustainable. And that's kind of the area that I'm wanting to go into in regards to marine biology and stuff like that. So it's awesome to know that there's at least some people who are trying to focus on that subject entirely and are trying to flip the script, as you said. Asma, was there anything you wanted to say about this topic?
Sure. I mean, I'm coming at this from a sport angle, so forgive me if you're not into sport, but I think it's translatable across a whole range of sectors. But I think in terms of flipping the script, I think we need to innovate in order to be inclusive. And when you think about sport, you may think about, our Olympic team or Paralympic team. You may think about winning championships, being athletic. And I think the conversation for us needs to shift because sport is such an incredible tool to unite communities that never would even consider coming together. From a really small lens in terms of how sport can look like on the field, we look at sport being able to generate conversations, but also to sort of build negotiation skills and communication skills. There's a game that we recreated whereby young people themselves are the rule makers and the rule, enforcers. So there's no referee. And both teams have to develop their own rules. They have to, negotiate it. They play based on those rules. And then at the end of the game, they award each other points based on the rules that they've come up with. There's other ways that we develop our activities where we use a netball game to then talk about overcoming stereotypes and discrimination, where there are different zones, different barriers that players can't cross through. And we use that as a metaphor for life and then start talking about and having conversations about ways to overcome some of those barriers or challenge those barriers. So from a, programmatic level, really looking at innovating the activities so that we can really communicate some positive messages and help young people themselves come up with the solutions. But then from a systemic perspective, the system of sport, there's so much that's lacking in terms of creating an equal playing field for communities who probably can't normally access the game because of financial barriers, cultural barriers. And for us, it's about how can we either encourage policies to be developed to create equitable opportunities so that there's more, we see really diverse athletes, but we don't see opportunities to become coaches or referees because the courses are extremely expensive. So looking at how sport can be more inclusive by giving communities and young people the tools to be able to design programs that's going to actually meet the needs of their community. We see, in some communities where young women are held in high esteem, but sport isn't seen as a priority because it's often seen as a threat to their identity, that they may lose their language. If we're talking about working with newly arrived refugee young people, they've got other, trauma experiences, other barriers that comes with settling into a new country, that sport isn't seen as a priority. But if we can look at how sport can create positive role models where you can play and still pursue an education and a career, that it's going to improve your confidence and well-being, that being able to have and build trust with those communities and being able to have that language to communicate the benefits for us is flipping the script. So I hope that is useful.
Yeah, 100%. That game sounds totally wild, by the way, the one that the kids get to make up the rules, like, and enforce the rules. It seems like an exercise in turbocharging imagination. Yeah, I think sport also helps with connection. And one thing that I think we've really learnt is our like intrinsic need for connecting with other people as humans after going through the last 18 months or so of disconnect. I would like to talk about if you think anything within the university that you've heard so far would resonate with any of the school students or young people that you work with as well, Asma.
Anything within the university? Sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, within IMAGI-NATION University. So we've got a stream for artists, writers, CEOs for good, filmmakers, and ambassadors to do their own change projects. So they design and implement their projects to help alleviate educational inequity in some shape or form. Do you think that's something that people within your network would be interested in?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry, I should have understood what you meant initially. Yes, firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the amazing work that AIM does, but through IMAGI-NATION University, when I found out about that, I was blown away. And I think just everything in terms of the power of relatable role models and representation is so key through storytelling and through leadership. But absolutely, in a practical sense, for example, next year we're looking at hosting a youth summit or a youth festival targeting year 10 and 11 students across New South Wales. And the idea is for young people from all walks of life to come together from various regions and cultures to collaborate, design games, play those games, but also from a, I guess, community-focused lens, look at designing solutions to some of the challenges that they're facing. So as a result of that, we want to help them identify further support to turn those ideas into action. And I would see an absolute pathway and opportunity there to collaborate with the IMAGI-NATION University, and not just for that summit, but I guess in a more immediate and practical sense. I can see that easily tying in and beyond.
That's really great to hear, because we've had like 1 year, 17 years behind the program delivery and the thinking that's gone into this, but the university is a 1 year old and we're co-founding this with everyone that comes in to build this knowledge base for people and pass on these lessons for maybe the next 500 years. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it'd be great
I'll add one more thing, sorry, is that like we have a 5-stage pathway from year 5 and 6 all the way through to high school. So year 7, 8, all the way through to year 12. So the 2 stages of that pathway, one is called Game Changer, another one's called Future Pathways. And an output or an outcome of those 2 is identifying solutions or creating solutions using different tools to those problems. But a lot of young people then we help them identify what sort of goals and opportunities they want to explore further. So that could be an opportunity there to link in with the university too.
Yeah, amazing. We'll get partnering to follow up with that. And just before we go to the closing statements, James, same question for you. Do you think this is something that would resonate with the students that you work with?
Look, absolutely. I mean, we're engaging kids from primary through to early school leavers, and every one of those categories that you mentioned, Steph, would be right for some of our kids, because as I said before, we don't push them in any direction. They kind of help. We support them to identify what kind of pathways they want to go down. I guess the one that sticks out for me at the moment is, and it's part of our Roots and Shoots resource box for schools, is a film festival competition for young people to create documentaries. And we really want them to tell their stories, whatever communities they're from. Obviously, we're talking about it through a prism of environment and climate change, but that's also about cultural presentation and truth-telling and all those sorts of stories that need to be told and need to be heard. And the more that we can support them around how they become great filmmakers, as well is just as important as creating habitat and taking action on climate. So yeah, I see lots of opportunities.
Amazing, really great to hear. I think one of the skills that you can learn as a filmmaker is being comfortable to share your story as well. So much value, I believe young people have in their stories. So yeah, really great to chat with you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us a little bit today. I'm going to throw over to Georgia to take us out on the closing statements.
So thanks for tuning in today, and I encourage you to keep thinking about the places you can put yourself that stretch you away from the more conventional ways of thinking to find solutions. If you're a young person watching this at the moment who's interested in joining the Imagination University next year, please go check out our new website where you'll find details and info on what's involved in the uni experience, as well as some great stories of other presidents and other students from all over the world who are having a go at moving the dial on educational inequality this year. Those students are gearing up for our graduation ceremony, and we're very excited because they'll be graduating as co-founders of Imagination University that could be a game changer in reframing education. Thank you to James and Asma for coming on the show and sharing your knowledge around flipping the script. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 10 a.m. AEDT, where we'll be talking about what 2022 will look like for teachers everywhere at Imagination University.